small valley where Jerry activity is known to be high. The Germans are beating a hasty retreat from Dieppe and are using all means available to them, by road, by rail, and on foot. An airborne horsefly, in the role of forward air controller, is carrying out a recon flight in the area and will talk you on to potential value targets. Good luck.
Select your mission difficulty level by the F10 menu. Easy, medium, or hard.
Horsefly red calling. Blue leader. Flight concentrations appear moderate. Looking for targets now. Weight 1, over. Horsefly red calling. Target spotted. A troop train is heading east from the smoke column. Preparing to drop a smoke bomb at its current location. Stand by. Over. Horsefly red calling. White smoke is now marking your target's last location. Over.
Jesus.
To your 1 o'clock is a column of smoke and flames in a small valley where Jerry activity. To your 1 o'clock is a column of smoke and flames
What's going on?
in a small valley where Jerry activity is known to be high. The Germans are beating a hasty retreat from Dieppe and are using all means available to them, by road, by rail. To your 1 o'clock is a column of smoke and flames in a small valley where Jerry activity is known to be high. The Germans are beating a hasty retreat from Dieppe and are using all means available to them, by road, by rail, and on foot. An airborne horsefly, in the role of forward air controller, is carrying out a recon flight in the area and will talk you on to potential value targets. Good luck.
Select your mission difficulty level by the F10 menu. Easy, medium, or hard.
Horsefly Red calling Blue Leader. Flak concentrations appear moderate. Looking for targets now. Wait 1, over. Horsefly Red calling. Target spotted. A troop train is heading east from the smoke column. Preparing to drop a smoke bomb at its current location. Stand by. Over. Horsefly Red calling. White smoke is now marking your target's last location. Over. Horsefly Red calling. The troop train has been destroyed. Excellent work. Good show. Damn it. Lone Jerry Wolf spotted approaching from the east. Looks like an A8. Approximate altitude Angel 3. Over.
Tell me there's a better compass than that thing. Jesus Fucking ball sack. Even in the single player it dicks me. I need to know where the guns are. Dotted around everywhere. Hey Hardwell, how's it going? This flak's gonna pull it, have me. Oh, my gunner is off with this thing. Yeet. Ow. I want to at least get one for my trouble. Well, I got the train. Let's do the actual training. Said today I was going to learn and fight in this thing, so onto the nitty parts. I did the introduction yesterday. Kind of shows you around the cockpit. I made the mistake of starting that at like 2 in the morning and didn't realise how much information they were going to tell me. They go over everything in that damn thing, and it's quite a complex cockpit by the looks of things. Couldn't find the gun's gyro either, which was annoying because I wanted to turn that off. Yeah, it's a bit of a tank, but I can't push it to its potential yet. Excuse me. Well, it should be good once I get it all trained.
In this lesson, we'll start in a cold and dark P-47 we need to bring to life. This can be a long process as described in the manual, so you can also enable an auto start function if you're in a hurry. But for this lesson, we'll review the full startup procedure used by pilots in World War II and still used by warbird pilots today. The key here is to find a sequence that you can perform every time so it becomes second nature. Some steps must be performed in order, but you have a lot of discretion while performing other tasks. Some prefer to perform actions in a left-right swing, while some prefer to group actions by system or function. The best sequence for you may or may not be the one laid out here, so look for techniques that work best for you. We'll begin with a quick sweep around the cockpit to check for trouble before the engine is running. First, set the air filter to on for dusty conditions or off if no dust is expected. We're starting on a paved airfield today, so this can be left off. Then, verify the gear handle is down and set the flaps lever forward to the up position. You'll usually leave the flaps up for takeoff and leave the handle in place to equalize the hydraulic pressure on both sides. That will keep them in sync as they extend and retract. Press spacebar to continue. Now, check that the fuel boost pump rheostat is rotated counterclockwise to the start altitude position. Then, rotate the fuel selector to main. This puts the fuel system into the correct configuration for startup. Also, set the generator switch up to on. This will provide electrical power once the engine is up and operating. Press spacebar to continue. Next, we test the hydraulic hand pump. Give it 2 or 3 pumps and verify the hydraulic pressure on the main instrument panel increases. This is to verify hydraulic pressure can be built up manually to extend the gear and flaps in the case of a hydraulic pump failure. Press spacebar to continue.
Where's the hydraulics? Is it that one there? I'd say it's that one. Yeah.
Now let's check the flight controls. Control rods are connected to the stick that move the ailerons on the wings and elevators on the horizontal tails in response to your actions. Control cables connect the rudder pedals to the rudder on the vertical tail. Move the stick and rudder through their full range of travel. We're looking for freedom of movement and the correct response from all the flight control surfaces. If you don't get that, this would be a good opportunity to map your flight controls to the proper access. You can access the control settings by pressing Escape and selecting Adjust Controls. Press spacebar to continue.
Keep distracting me with the flybys.
Set the trim tab controls. Run them through their full range of travel and check for correct operation. This is usually done with help from the crew chief, but you can verify this yourself by entering the external view, F2. Then return to the cockpit using the F1 key. For takeoff, we set aileron to neutral, rudder to takeoff, elevator to neutral for an empty auxiliary fuel tank, or elevator to 1/4 inch forward of neutral for a full auxiliary fuel tank. We have an empty auxiliary fuel tank today, so go ahead and set that to neutral. Press spacebar to continue.
Just sounds a lot taken. Takeoff, neutral, and neutral.
Let's check the toe brakes for proper operation and make sure the parking brake is set for startup. Depress and release the toe brakes located on the rudder pedals and check they operate freely. If they do not, this is another good opportunity to double check your control settings and map your own controls to the proper axis. Then, to reset the parking brake, pull the knob, depress and release the toe brake pedals, then release the knob. The toe brake should remain depressed. This will help keep us from creeping forward when the engine is running. Press spacebar to continue. Next, let's set the prop switch up to auto for startup. This ensures the prop RPM is controlled through the prop lever on the throttle quadrant. Then, check and set the altimeter. Now, this can be set so the field altitude reads 0, or you can rotate the knob to match the briefed barometric pressure, so the field altitude is the actual altitude above sea level. That's entirely up to you. Press spacebar to continue. After that, wind and set the clock. We can wind it by rotating the knob clockwise. Now, the clock should already be set to local time, but you may adjust it by clicking to extend the knob, then rotating it to the desired time if you wish to work off Zulu time or some other pre-arranged reference. Press spacebar to continue. Next, let's open the engine cowl flaps. This is required on the ground to prevent burning of the ignition harness under the cowling. Pull the handle until the cowl flaps open fully. These are hydraulically operated, so use the hand pump to build up some pressure if there's not some in the system already. There is no gauge for their position, but you'll see them very easily looking straight ahead. Press spacebar to continue.
It's like the hydraulic pressure isn't showing properly. Unless I'm looking at the wrong gauge. I'll assume it's done, so that should be in front of me. Pull the handle. Pull the handle until the cowl flaps are fully open. They look fully open to me. Let's assume that that's done. It's like the hydraulic pressure isn't working. Yeah, I'm trying to. Apparently the cowl flaps don't want to work. To me, that looks like they're open. But spacebar is not allowing me to continue, and I can't pump any hydraulic pressure like it said. Definitely hydraulic pressure. Oh Jesus. Just wanted to go outside the cockpit. Yeah, it seems like the hydraulic pressure isn't working properly. Maybe it's something to do with the... oh, I do. Maybe it's because of the flaps? Said something about the flaps. Ah, I had the flaps in the wrong position. Alright, so now I've got some hydraulic pressure. I should be able to pull that. Still doesn't seem to be working.
And now we come to a series of power on checks to verify operation of the electrically powered instruments and systems. First, set the battery switch to on. Check that the prop governor circuit breaker and all circuit breakers on the main electrical panel are in. If a breaker is extended, push it to reset. If it pops back out, there's a problem, usually an electrical short somewhere in that system. Depending on the importance of the system and urgency of the mission, you may either accept the fault and leave the system disabled, or abort the aircraft. For our purposes, this should be extremely rare though. Press spacebar to continue. Next, we'll test the warning lights. Toggle the 2 test switches on the main electrical panel up and down. Each switch is marked with the lights that are tested with each position. The landing gear, fuel level, oxygen, and turbine overspeed warning lights should come on as appropriate. The warning lights may also be depressed to test illumination of the bulbs. Press spacebar to continue. Now, check the fuel quantity indicator on the main instrument panel.
Jesus Christ, that's a lot.
Main and auxiliary tanks should match the breathed level. These indicators are calibrated for an aircraft in horizontal flight, so use the correction table on the left when on the ground with the nose up. Then, check the oxygen pressure gauge to the right for a full charge. Press spacebar to continue.
Ignorance is bliss on that part. I'm going to assume everything's fine.
Then last, we test and set the intercooler and oil cooler shutters. Use the switches to cycle the shutters through their full range of motion as shown on the indicators just to the left. For a normal startup, set both shutters to the neutral position, but in cold weather the oil cooler shutter should be set to closed. Press spacebar to continue.
Oh, I see. I thought it was like an automatic switch. I was getting that totally wrong. Let's use switches. Normal setup, both shutters in neutral position. I think that's something I'm going to need to have mapped. Cool. Let me just set those. Just set those buttons. So I got canopy. Doesn't crash on me. What have I got? I've clicked something here and it's conflicting with my controls. Okay. Canopy close. I want that one. Oh, in fact. Canopy electrical switch close. I probably want, which is that one. One. That's annoying. I need to change that eventually. I've got it to click close. Alright, for now. I'll change that later in my controls. To cooler, and what is that one? Oh, cooler. Same problem with that, where it's not holding it. I'll set them at least, and then I can sort them out later. Oil. Probably gonna have the same problem. Well, that's fine. Just forward on the intercooler.
Now, return the battery switch to the off position. We'll start the aircraft using an external battery card connected later by the crew chief, We could start on the battery if needed, but using another power source for startup preserves the charge and extends the service life. Press spacebar to continue. With the basic system checks taken care of, it's time to start the engine. Let's set the levers on the throttle quadrant to the correct position. Now check or set supercharger full aft, throttle cracked forward about 1 inch, prop full forward, and mixture aft to idle cutoff. Press spacebar to continue.
Prop full, mixture to idle cutoff. I think that's right.
Now let's ask the crew chief to connect the external battery card for startup. Open the communications menu with the / key and select ground crew, F8. Then select ground electric power, F2, and on, F1.
Chief, turn on
Press
the ground
spacebar
power.
to continue after power is applied.
Copy. Ground power is now on.
The crew chief will have already rotated the prop several turns by hand, so now we prime the engine. Right-click to rotate the engine primer handle out of the locked position, then pull the handle 2 to 4 strokes in hot weather or 4 to 6 if cold. It's a warm day, so prime 3 strokes, then right-click the handle to lock it back in place. Press spacebar to continue.
Right click to rotate and pull the handle. I am trying. Pulling the handle doesn't seem to want to work. Are you like clicking in the wrong place, primer? Oh.
Now verify the prop is clear and set ignition to both to select both magnetos. Then flick the starter switch up to engage, then back to off. This seats the starter brushes. Press spacebar to continue.
This is a lot to remember.
These next few steps can go very quickly, so let's talk through what will happen first. We're going to energize the flywheel for 15 to 20 seconds using the starter switch until the flywheel is up to speed. It's important to get the timing right, so we're going to use the clock at the top left as a reference. After 15 seconds, we engage the flywheel onto the engine by setting the starter switch to engage. This transfers the flywheel's energy to the engine to turn it over. We'll keep the switch held to engage until the engine fires. Then move the mixture control to auto rich.
Okay.
The starter switch can be left and engaged for 5 or 6 revs of the prop to provide a hotter spark and help the engine to catch. Return it to off when the engine is running on its own. Now this requires some dexterity if you're using the mouse dual, so consider mapping the starter switch and mixture lever controls to a convenient place. Now when you're ready, press the spacebar and we'll run through this step by step. Okay, check the clock and hold the starter switch to energize for 15 to 20 seconds. That's 15. Now engage. Look and listen for the engine to catch. Set the mixture lever to auto wrench and release the starter switch after a few revs.
That's not too bad.
We should be up and running. If that did not quite work, no problem. We can deal with that in the next step. Press spacebar to continue. Now, if the engine does not catch on the first attempt, release the starter switch and return the mixture lever to idle cutoff. Something like the engine priming, fuel supply, or electrical power probably missed along the way. You'll want to wait 1 minute to allow the starter to cool down, then double check the cockpit setup before trying again. For now though, with the engine running, turn the battery switch on and request that the crew chief disconnect electrical power. Open the communications menu with the / key and select ground crew, F8, then select ground electric power, F2, and off, F2. press spacebar to continue.
Chief, turn off the ground power. Copy.
See, I like to do this manually when I'm in the multiplayer servers, but that's
Ground power is now off.
a fair bit to do. Okay, now I can see them opening and closing, so let's make sure they're full open cowl flaps.
Okay, now we need to let the engine warm up and check it out. Set the throttle so the engine RPM is about 900, and check the oil pressure right away. Shut the engine off if it's not above 25 psi within 30 seconds. Now in cold weather, you can expect an oil pressure increase to about 150 to 200 psi before it settles down to its normal range of 75 to 85 psi. The oil temperature gauge should settle down at about 50 degrees Celsius. Fuel pressure should be about 22 to 24 psi, and cylinder head temperature should settle in at about 100 to 260 degrees. Then check for proper hydraulic pressure between 800 and 1100 psi. We'll not advance the throttle above 1000 RPM until all of these are squared away. It usually takes about 3 minutes for the warm-up to complete. There's one more set of checks to run after the engine is warm, but rather than wait out the full 3 minutes, let's pick up there in the next lesson. Press spacebar to continue. Now, this entire process probably seems like a lot to handle at first, but you'll quickly find that most steps can be done with a glance or a quick sweep from control to control. This entire sequence that might have taken 20 minutes to run through step by step will take no more than a minute once you've found the sequence that works best for you. The auto start function is also an option if you just want to go for a quick flight, but having run through this entire sequence will have given you a lot of insight into how the systems work and how to use them when it counts. For now, you may feel free to continue looking around or in the lesson at any time using the escape key. We'll pick up again right here with the run-up check in the next lesson.
It's got oil. Turbo RPMs. Just the temps. Sorry, I'm just trying to get myself carburetor. It's pressure. I'm trying to look for the temperature gauges. Speed. Hydraulic pressure. Don't know. Let's come back to that. Don't like that the gun sight stuff is a bit everywhere, but what can you do? Anyway, let's go to the next training. I don't know where you guys are in the world, but it's hot here today. Not a common occurrence for the UK.
We left off in the last lesson immediately after engine start, waiting for the warm-up to complete. In this lesson, we have a warm engine and are ready to perform a quick series of checks to verify everything is operating properly. This is the time to spot trouble, not while on the takeoff roll or in the air. The preferred place to do this is in chocks, with the right people around to troubleshoot any problems that are encountered, but that's not always possible due to mission timing requirements, dust, or loose items that may be blown around by the prop. So this check can be performed any time before takeoff. Press spacebar when you're ready to get started. We're going to be running the engine up, so we need to either hold the brakes or set the parking brake. To set the parking brake, pull the knob, depress and release the toe brake pedals, then release the knob. The toe brake should remain depressed. Press spacebar to continue.
Hold the knob. Press and release, then release. Okay. That's where I was going wrong.
Now, we're going to use the throttle to set 30 inches of mercury manifold pressure and the prop lever to set 2000 RPM for the check. So push forward to open the throttle, but do it slowly and don't let the RPM exceed 2000 or the brakes may not hold us in place. Pull the prop lever back to keep RPM under control as you go. Once you have 30 inches of mercury and 2000 RPM set, press spacebar to continue. Okay, let's check both magnetos. Set the ignition switch to R for the right mag, then L for the left mag while watching the engine RPM down. You can expect to drop about 60 RPM while running on either mag, but never more than 100. All as well, set the switch back to both. Press spacebar to continue.
Didn't see any dip, but whatever. Oh, a little, I guess.
Next, let's check operation of the propeller doubler by exercising the prop lever. Pull the lever back until you get a drop of about 200 RPM on the gauge. Then release for a moment to ensure there's no oscillation that could indicate a faulty governor. Then return RPM to 2000. Press spacebar to continue. Then, verify backup operation of the prop by placing the switch down to the fixed pitch position. Check the toggle forward increases RPM and toggling aft decreases RPM. Set the switch back up to auto when done. Press spacebar to continue.
Again, I don't really see that. Oh, that changes it down.
Next, we'll operate the engine on each fuel tank, including the externals if installed. Now's the time to catch a fuel feed probe, not while in the air. We have no externals installed for this lesson, but I did add some fuel feed auxiliary tanks to demonstrate this check. Rotate the fuel selector from main to auxiliary. Verify the engine does not stutter or hesitate for more than a moment or two, and fuel pressure remains between 22 and 24 psi. Set the selector back to main when done. Press spacebar to continue. Then check for a charge on the ammeter, the main instrument. This indicates that the generator is operating. If no charge is indicated, verify the RPM and set it on to 1100 or so required to operate the generator. If there's still no charge indicated, there's a problem and you should abort the aircraft. If the charge is simply low, it means that the battery is fully charged and hoping to pick up the electrical load. Press spacebar to continue. You'll want to verify the engine instruments are still normal with this increased RPM. So check for an oil pressure between 75 and 85 psi, oil temperature about 50 degrees, cylinder head temperature between 100 and 260, fuel pressure 22 to 24 psi, and hydraulic pressure 800 to 1100 psi. Most gauges are marked with green bands to indicate the normal range. Once those are checked, let's pull the throttle back to get an RPM of about 900. You should also push the prop lever back to its full forward position. Engine RPM on the ground and during taxi will usually be below the 1100 required to run the generator, so you'll be using up the battery power. You'll want to minimize the time on the ground or run the engine up periodically to run the generator and to refresh the charge. Press spacebar to continue.
It's a bit hot. It says 50, but let's have a look at it. Oh, it's no oil temperature. That's right. So cylinder head. Carburetor. Hydraulic pressure is fine. Fuel pressure. Let's see, fuel pressure. Oh, I suppose that's it there, isn't it? It's inside the bands. Just a little bit hot.
Well, that completes the run-up check, but there's still some tiny cleanup tasks to perform to get ready for taxi. So let's uncage and set the horizon gyro. Right-click the knob to uncage the gyro, then rotate the other knob to set it. We're sitting nose high on the ground, so a proper setting will have a horizon line below the wings. The gyro can easily lose alignment in flight and maneuver in a way that it can't cope with, so to deal with that, maneuver wings level, cage and uncage the gyro, and reset the horizon. Press spacebar to continue. The directional gyro should have had time to calibrate by now and is probably already set to show our true heading. You can compare this to a known heading on the ground or to the magnetic compass in the center of the instrument panel. The knob can be used to reset the direction any time if it goes out of alignment. You'll likely need to do this periodically during flight. Press spacebar to continue. Then last, let's turn on the radio by pushing the button for the channel we want to transmit and receive on. This can be A, B, C, or D, depending on how the mission is set up. The details, if communication is required at all, will be listed in your mission brief. This is usually delayed as long as possible to preserve the battery, but can be done at any time if communications are required earlier in the mission. So at this point, we're ready to taxi to the runway and take off. Press spacebar to continue. So far, we've seen all of the major systems at work except armaments, and it's time to fly the aircraft. Believe me, we'll be glad these building blocks are in place, and we're not trying to figure all this out and fly at the same time. We'll come back in the next lesson, ready to taxi to the runway and take off. So feel free to continue exploring the aircraft on your own, or press escape to end this lesson at any time.
It's quite interesting doing all the training. Usually I'll just watch a YouTube video and wing it, but yeah, this is quite nice.
In the first 3 lessons, we looked over the aircraft, started it up, and made sure it was operating properly. Now it's time to take it out to the runway and get into the air. The main task in this next series of lessons is to keep the aircraft under control. Remember, go at your own pace, fly the aircraft, get comfortable, then move on to the next step. Nothing here is time sensitive. We're starting this lesson with the brakes released and wheel chocks removed, so confirm your throttle is pulled all the way back. Set the parking brake if you would like, but we'll be moving very shortly. Press spacebar when you're ready to get started.
So ready.
The first thing you may notice is you can't see a thing directly ahead. That means we need to taxi in a series of S-turns, snaking back and forth along the taxiway. To do that, we're going to leave the tail wheel unlocked and use differential braking to steer the aircraft once we're moving. All it takes is a gentle pump of the brake on the side you wish to turn and the aircraft will swing in that direction. Verify the tail wheel lever is aft in the unlocked position. We'll leave it there until lined up on the runway. Press spacebar to continue. The runway is straight ahead, so we can follow these other two aircraft out. I'll talk you through the rest of the process and we'll have a look at technique as we go. Now, depress and release the toe brakes to release the parking brake if necessary, and advance the throttle just enough to get forward motion. Test both brake pedals to verify they're working and start to get a feel for them. Once you're moving, use just enough throttle to maintain momentum. You're clear straight ahead, but be sure to check your path using S-turns along the way. Your focus shouldn't be on your current path. Clear the area visually to either side, then taxi in that direction. You can think of the differential braking as a balancing act. If you swing too far in one direction too fast, you can spin out of control. The key is to keep your forward speed under control and use the gentlest bumping of the brakes possible to turn the aircraft. Try to stop any big turns that develop in one direction or another before it becomes a problem. You've probably noticed the aircraft is easier to turn to the left than to the right. The spinning propeller creates a gyroscopic force that will naturally pull you to the left. Once you get a feel for it, you can use that to your advantage and even make some turns to the left without braking at all. Your main landing gear are set very wide apart, so the P-47 will be very stable on takeoff and landing. During taxi, you can judge their position by looking at the inboard guns on the wings. The main gear wheels will be directly below them. This can be good to know on narrow taxiways or tight turns where you need to know how far you can go from the center line. Okay, we're coming up on the runway. Look left and right to check the traffic and turn to line up on the center line. We already performed the run-up check, but if you still needed to perform it, this would be a good spot. For now, let's turn left and get ready to take off.
Still there, buddy? Hello? Probably have to move forward to trigger him or something, I don't know.
Now line up with the runway and roll straight ahead a little to align the tail wheel. Push the tail wheel lock lever forward, lock it fore and aft. We'll hold in place right here for a moment. Press spacebar to continue. We want the supercharger to work in unison with the throttle from now on, so let's interconnect the boost lever and the throttle. To do that, set the boost lever to the same position as the throttle and right-click the interconnection latch. That should lock it to the throttle. Press spacebar to continue. This is the very last chance to catch items that were missed before, so let's verify the items that could cause serious problems before committing to the takeoff roll. Let's check for trim tabs, set for takeoff in the neutral
Canopy
or
open?
takeoff position, mixture auto rich, prop control box, breaker in and switch to automatic, drop lever full forward, fuel selector, main tank, flaps up, cowl flaps open, and canopy open. Press spacebar to continue.
Good.
The fun part is coming up next, so we'll talk through everything that is coming up, then run through it all step by step. First, we'll hold the brakes and run the engine up to 30 inches of mercury manifold pressure. The ammeter should show a charge from the generator, and engine instruments should read normal. Release the brakes and smoothly advance the throttle to 48 inches. Do not exceed 52 inches of mercury or use full throttle, as that can overstretch the engine and create more torque from the prop than can be controlled. As you begin to move, the locked tail wheel will help keep you aligned, but you'll also need to use rudder to maintain track down the center line. Remember, the aircraft will naturally stray to the left due to torque, so anticipate some corrections to the right. The aircraft will also tend to weather vane into the direction a crosswind is coming from, so be sure to check the weather and windsock at the end of the runway so you know which direction you can expect to correct into. Large control inputs will be required at first until airflow makes the rudder and other surfaces more effective at around 60 miles per hour. After that, small, gentle inputs will be needed. Don't let that transition catch you by surprise, or you could end up over-controlling the aircraft. The aircraft will lift off from a 3-point attitude at about 100 miles per hour, but that's a little too close to the stall speed. We want to allow the tailwheel to come up just off the runway, then fly the aircraft off at about 110 miles per hour. At that point, above all, fly the aircraft. Then we'll get the aircraft cleaned up for the climb. Once we have a positive rate of climb established with everything under control, we'll raise the landing gear. When you're ready, press spacebar to continue, and we'll give this a shot.
What marker is it? Do you mean that? Oh, in IL2. Honestly, buddy, I don't know. It depends what marker you mean. I can't even recall. I think it depends on what map you're on, but I'm not fully sure. Sorry, I can't be more help, buddy.
Okay, hold the brakes and advance the throttle to 30 inches of mercury. Check for normal indications with the charge on the ammeter and all the engine gauges in the green like we've seen in all the checks so far. Then release the brakes and advance the throttle to 48 inches of mercury. With the rudder to maintain alignment and stick to maintain the rudder, feel smooth and decisive. Tail wheel raise slightly, fly the aircraft off the runway. Don't over-rotate with the stop. Bring back as gently and stiff as possible. Great job so far. Now remember to keep flying the aircraft. When you have it under control, touch the brakes to stop the wheels from spinning, and raise the landing gear. There's no rush. We're picking up the tail and moving off the ground. Verify the landing gear warning light goes out to show you up and locked. Take your time, press spacebar, continue.
Oh, you hear him.
Let's reduce throttle some, then pull the prop lever back to 2250 RPM. This gives us the best climb performance consistent with engine output.
22.
And set the throttle to 42.5 inches of mercury for the climb. Press spacebar to continue. Power changes are generally done like this. Set the manifold pressure to the right general range with the throttle, set the exact propeller RPM, then set an exact manifold pressure. Your best climbing speed is 150 to 165 miles per hour. Raise the nose and use elevator trim to hold in place without requiring a lot of stick force. Press spacebar to continue when things are settled down. Last, we need to start managing engine temperature very soon after takeoff. If the air filter was used, set it back to off as soon as you're at a dust-free altitude to prevent carburetor air overheat. Check the cylinder head temperature frequently for less than 260 degrees. This will be the easiest item to overheat. This is managed by opening and closing the cowl flaps, so keep the cowl flaps open on the climb if cooling is needed. Increase speed if that's not enough to keep them cool. Otherwise, you can close the cowl flaps at any time to reduce drag and help with climb performance. check that oil temperature is below 95 degrees and carburetor air temperature is below 35 degrees. Open or close the oil and intercooler shutters to manage temperatures if required. Press spacebar to continue.
Cylinder head. Temperature has to be 95. Yep, that's that one. Carburetor 35. Yep.
If you've made it this far, you're doing quite well. It may not have been pretty, but finesse will come with time. We'll pick up in the next lesson with aircraft handling. We'll fly the aircraft some, look at dive recovery, and learn how to identify a stall. This will help us out later when we need to fly the aircraft on the landing approach. For now, feel free to continue on your own. You can press escape at any time to leave the lesson.
Oh, bit of compressibility. Or have I busted it? It's a shaky old brick. Anyway, next mission. Dive bombing. Stretch.
Let's take some time now to look at a few aspects of basic aircraft handling. We'll talk a little about trim, high altitude operations, stalls, spins, and dive recovery. First, let's get the aircraft set up. Set it to 2325 RPM with the front lever and 35 inches of mercury manifold pressure in the throttle for standard cruise. Keep flying straight ahead with the wings level. Press spacebar when you're ready.
Yeah. Think I'm about there.
Okay, first thing, let's get the aircraft trim squared away so you don't have to concentrate so much on flying the aircraft. We've seen the 3 trim controls for elevator, aileron, and rudder already, but always in the context of takeoff where specific settings are required. Now that we're in the air, the trim that's required will change dynamically depending on things like airspeed, engine torque, wind direction, fuel state, and aircraft stores loading. Right now, you'll notice that flying straight and level requires some force on your stick and rudder. We want to cancel those forces out using trim so that no input is required to keep the aircraft straight and level. Press spacebar to continue. First, use elevator trim to cancel out the fore and aft force on the stick. You can eyeball level flight by looking at the horizon or reference the rate of climb indicator or artificial horizon on the main.
Thanks, buddy. You too.
Airspeed is the main factor that affects elevator trim, so expect to adjust this quite often in flight. Press spacebar to continue.
Take it easy, man. I'll catch you later. Cheers.
Now, aileron and rudder trim are a little trickier because any change to one will influence the other. The good news is that they require fewer changes than elevator trim once they're set. Airspeed has an effect on these, but torque from engine RPM changes will probably require the most attention. One technique is to use rudder trim first to cancel out the rudder force. Then use aileron trim to cancel out anything on the stick. You can do this in any order. You can gauge the trim required for coordinated flight by checking the main instrument panel's bank and turn indicator. Center the bubble with rudder trim, and center the needle with aileron trim. Trim will change constantly, so it doesn't have to be perfect, just enough to ease the burden of holding the aircraft straight and level. Press spacebar to continue when you're set. For now, we're shooting for straight and level flight, but we can also trim for a climb or descent, or set it up for doing a turn. It's inaccurate to say you'll be flying the aircraft with trim, but you can almost think of it that way. This will become natural and instinctive after a few flights. Now, moving on, we started the lesson at 20,000 feet, so let's take a moment to look at high altitude flight. Increase RPM to 2550 and manifold pressure to 42 inches of mercury, and trim to hold us in the climb. Press spacebar to continue. The two most important systems at high altitude are your oxygen and supercharger. The cockpit is not pressurized, so you'll need supplemental breathing oxygen to survive up this high. Always verify your oxygen regulator is set to auto, and check your oxygen pressure gauge periodically. The red oxygen warning light next to the gauge comes on when you're running low. If you run out, you'll need to descend or risk losing consciousness. Press spacebar to continue. The P-47 was designed for high altitude and includes a very capable turbo supercharger. The idea is to route engine exhaust and cold air through a high-speed turbine and then return that compressed, supercharged air to the combustion chambers. This increases the available manifold pressure far beyond what's available using the throttle and valve. The amount of air used, and therefore the supercharger's turbine RPM, is controlled using the boost lever that's currently linked to the throttle. Press spacebar to continue. To demonstrate this, unlink the boost lever from the throttle by picking the interconnection latch. Then pull the boost lever back slightly. You'll see two things: the supercharger's turbine RPM at the top right of the instrument panel and the engine manifold pressure will decrease. You'll have less engine power and may not be able to maintain the climb. Try that if you would like, then return the boost lever to the throttle. Remember, never advance the boost lever past the throttle. This can create pressure buildup below the seals in the air duct. If that happens, you might be able to build up pressure and will likely have to descend. Press spacebar to continue. As we climb, the supercharger will have to work harder and harder to provide enough air to maintain the set manifold pressure. It will eventually reach a point where the turbine RPM is too high and you need to pull the boost lever back. You'll watch for the red turbine overspeed warning light to illuminate, showing the RPM has exceeded the red line value at 22,000. At that point, pull the lever back until the light goes out. You will eventually reach a point where the throttle is wide open and the supercharger will no longer be able to maintain a high manifold pressure, or the intercooler is no longer able to keep the air temperature within safe limits. That's as high as you're going to go. Feel free to explore this more if you would wish, and return to around 25 to 30,000 feet, straight and level before moving on. Engine settings are at your discretion from here on out, but watch those temperatures. Press spacebar when you're ready to move on and we'll look at stalls and spin recovery.
Hey buddy, yeah, I just bought it yesterday. Courtesy of one of the guys. He's unfortunately not here, but he wanted to see me fly it, so I'm learning it. Hopefully I'm going to be using it in Storm of War later this evening. By the sounds of it, it's going to be a good bomber escort. It's complicated compared to the others.
Quite a bit, and the airspeed is likely then low at times. Low speed means the wing is at a higher angle of attack in relation to the flight path. When that angle is too high, the smooth aircraft
Does seem like it.
lift is obstructed, lift is lost, and the aircraft enters a stall. You'll be able to recognize this very easily because the aircraft will begin to shudder and controls will become sluggish. This is sometimes referred to as buffeting. To recover, simply relaxing the back pressure on the stick and lower the nose to gain airspeed. Slow down some and give it a try now if you would like. Press spacebar to continue.
Is that right? But surely you can go higher and dive. Oh, you could hear the engine engage. Oh, there's the turbocharger.
The aircraft is very aerodynamically stable, especially with an empty auxiliary fuel tank.
I've been flying a lot of the 109 as well, but only because the blue team's always full. Mustang's my baby, really, but I also love the Spitfire. I love all the World War II birds. I haven't particularly got attached to the Focke-Wulf 190 yet, though. Not as much as I would have wanted to.
This would cause the nose to dip, and the flight controls would have little or no effects due to the disturbed airflow. The aircraft will descend in an out-of-control corkscrew motion. Or spacebar to continue.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. He's saying if you... Sorry, I was trying to speak over that. What he was saying just now is if you get to a certain altitude, your boost and your throttle get to a point where the turbo is trying to get your manifold pressure up too much, so it will overspeed and it will just blow itself up. So I think what he was saying is you have to disconnect your lever from the boost and just kind of use your throttle after, I want to say, I think he said like 23,000. It's something I'm going to have to mess around with because I'm trying to take all this in, but there's so much to take in. The startup sequence alone is crazy. I've never used it with MW50, and pretty much for that reason, because it's so unavailable, I think I'd rather get used to it without it, if you know what I mean. And then when I've got it, oh, that's a treat. But yeah, I don't know, I've not used it. I'm assuming it's just when you put the throttle full forward and it goes crazy that you can sustain that for longer. I only do that in 3-second intervals without it.
To initiate a quick recovery, apply full opposite rudder, stick against the spin that's in the same direction as the rudder, and slight back pressure on the stick. You can also advance the throttle to help you gain speed if needed. This should allow the aircraft to recover within 1/2 turn and only cost you about 1,000 feet of altitude. You can try that now if you like, but don't do it later on your own. You can die recovering from high altitude later, so it would be best to stay above 20,000 feet if you give this a try now.
So slow down.
To level off, decrease speed until you stall, then smoothly apply aft stick and full rudder in the direction you wish to spin. Press spacebar to continue when you're ready to move on.
Doesn't sound good, did it? Alright, so let's try getting ourselves into a spin. Don't even feel like that was a...
It's also possible to enter a much more serious flight spin, either upright or inverted on your back. Both wings will have lost all lift, so instead of the normal nose-down corkscrew motion, the aircraft will remain level and fall like a leaf. You'll need a little luck to recover from either of these, especially the inverted variety. Expect to lose at least 10,000 feet. If you descend below 10,000 feet in a flat spin, bail out, jettison the canopy, and lift control E 3 times. To recover from an upright flat spin, apply some opposite rudder, advance the throttle, and apply stick in the direction of the spin, opposite the rudder. And for an inverted flat spin, apply apply full stick in the direction you appear to be turning, and slight back pressure on the stick. Feel free to give those a shot at some point, but best to do those on your own later. Press spacebar to continue. Go ahead and climb back up to about 25,000 feet and level off if you're not already. We're going to look briefly at a very common, potentially dangerous task of diving the aircraft. You'll use dives most often for weapons delivery, dive bombing against enemy targets, or as an escape maneuver during air combat. The dive can be entered by either rolling the aircraft, pulling down, and rolling back out, or by gently pushing the nose down. Be careful not to put too much negative G into the aircraft while nosing over them, as that can starve the engine of oil if done for more than about 7 seconds. If you have time to set it up before you dive, trim the aircraft slightly tail heavy to aid in recovery later, and close the cowl flaps to prevent damage from overspeed. Also, decrease manifold pressure before starting. The pressure will increase as you descend, so it's possible to overboost the engine if you're not careful. Press spacebar to continue. Normal dive recovery, simply apply smooth back pressure to the stick and recover gradually. The main risk during a dive is too much airspeed, that can lead to
I know I'm struggling with trying to hear.
and loss of aircraft control. Compressibility happens when shock waves form near or on the control surfaces as the aircraft nears the speed of sound. That can freeze the controls in place. For dive bombing, it's not a common problem because you're in control of the airspeed you begin the dive from. For air combat, however, you'll from time to time be in a tough spot with something on your tail and need to push the aircraft to its limits. That's where you'll encounter these out-of-control conditions the most. Remember, the higher the altitude, the lower the airspeed where compressibility becomes a factor. Also, never perform a vertical dive from above 30,000 feet. That's certain to result in excessive speed. Also, it's counterintuitive, but never decrease power during dive recovery. That can just cause the nose to dip even more. Increase power if the dive tends to steepen. Press spacebar to continue. You'll recognize compressibility in a dive by lack of elevator response and a tendency for the nose to dip. To recover, hold steady back pressure on the stick, but don't attempt to hold back on it all the way just yet. That'll do no good until the altitude is below 18,000 feet. Then lower the compressibility recovery flaps. They'll help control the airspeed on the way down. At 18,000 feet, apply strong back pressure to the stick until the elevators become effective. You should get some response by 15,000 feet. If you're still out of control at that point, apply all the elevator trim you can to pull the nose up. Now, this is not something that would ever be done intentionally during flight training, but give it a shot now if you would like. This is the last item that's going to be covered in this lesson. Press spacebar to continue and we'll wrap up.
Let's pop. No, probably not high, even high enough, but... I don't think I even approached it, I was too scared.
Well, that was a look at some basic aircraft handling specific to the P-47. It would be a good idea to practice trimming the aircraft and stall recovery some more before moving on to the next lesson that covers landing. Try it at different altitudes and different aircraft configurations, like with flaps and gear extended. We'll be flying at low speed very close to the ground, so that could save us some trouble later on. When you're ready, I'll see you in the next lesson. Press spacebar to continue on your own, or escape to
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I totally read that wrong just now. Yeah, so you don't like to fly the 190 without MW50. Again, I've not done it. But I can understand why. That the D9 definitely seems to feel like more of the high altitude interceptor than the 109s do.
In these first few lessons, we've become familiar with the aircraft in basic flight. Now comes one of the more challenging parts, getting the aircraft stopped on the ground in one piece. I have the lesson paused in the air so we can set the aircraft up and go over the process. Then we'll unpause and execute the landing and shutdown. We're starting offset from the landing runway. You can see our destination just off our nose to the left a few miles ahead. I'll explain more on this later. Press spacebar when you're ready to get started. First, let's get the aircraft set up in preparation for approach and landing. Check the position of the fuel selector. We want it set to main for important flight events, including landing. If for some reason the main tank is almost empty, use the auxiliary tank. You should have kept a 10-gallon reserve for just this purpose. Press spacebar to continue.
I think I've only got one kill against a human in the D9.
And the breaker is in. Use the prop lever to set 2,550 RPM for the approach. You'll use the throttle to control engine power and your speed. You'll reduce it to about 140 to 150 miles per hour once we get on the approach a little later. Press spacebar to continue. Next, push the tailwheel lock handle forward to lock it in the fore and aft position. You'll need this as you roll out after landing to keep the aircraft tracking down the runway. Also, verify the cowl flaps are closed on the approach and landing to reduce drag and help with visibility. Cylinder head temperatures should be fine, but you can open the cowl flaps in hot weather or at normal conditions if more cooling is needed. Press spacebar to continue.
So they can pretty much stay closed by the sounds of it.
If conditions are dusty, push the air filter lever forward to enable the air filter. You can leave it in place for this lesson though. Then last, open the canopy with the switch or by clicking either of the handles. For this lesson, however, you may want to leave it closed so you can still hear the instructions. The bubble canopy can only be jettisoned when there's enough airflow to separate it from the frame. You want the canopy open for landing in case of an emergency like a fire or a tip over that requires...
Take care, buddy. Catch you soon.
Press spacebar to continue. Now let's talk through the rest of the approach and landing before unpausing and flying it. You'll find references to overhead landing patterns where you fly down the runway and turn back to make a circuit of the airfield before touching down. For this first introduction to landing, however, we want to enter the landing pattern from the side. I've placed a series of gates straight ahead to show our best path. We will descend to a normal pattern altitude of 1,000 feet above the ground before turning left and descending on final approach to the runway. You'll notice we're not flying this as a straight-in approach. The design of most World War II aircraft limits visibility straight ahead, so we'll always keep the runway in view to one side until just before touching down. Press spacebar to continue. After unpausing, we'll slow down enough to safely withstand...
Hey, thank you for the follow.
From there, we'll maintain an approach speed of 140 to 150 miles per hour, being sure not to start any turns below 130 miles per hour. When we begin to line up with the runway on final approach, we'll slow to 115 to 120 miles per hour. Smoothly reduce the throttle when over the runway and manage your descent to touch down as gently as possible. Try for a 3-point landing with all 3 wheels touching down at the same time. As soon as you're firmly on the ground, apply gradual brake pressure to slow the aircraft. Maintain track down the runway with your rudder until it's no longer effective, then use differential braking to maintain track. Press spacebar to continue. After landing, you'll open your cowl flaps, raise the flaps, unlock the tail wheel, and taxi clear of the runway. We'll park the aircraft and go through a very simple shutdown procedure, assuming all goes well to that point. Press spacebar to continue.
Doesn't sound like he's got a lot of faith in me.
Okay, now let's give it a shot. I want to unpause the lesson before lowering the gear and flaps so you can feel the changes to aircraft performance and trim as those happen. When you're ready, press spacebar to unpause the lesson and we'll do those first. Then I'll talk you through the rest of the approach. Take your time and get the aircraft under control. Then verify airspeed is below 200 miles per hour and lower the landing gear handle. Verify the landing gear warning light comes on while the gear are in motion and goes out when the gear are down and locked. This can take some time, so don't worry if it takes a while. If the gear fails to extend due to a hydraulic system failure, you can usually lock them in place by yawing the aircraft side to side. Press spacebar to continue. Now, we need to lower the flaps. This will add lift and reduce the required approach and landing speed. The gear and flaps work off the same hydraulic system, so never raise or extend both simultaneously, but verify airspeed is below 190 miles per hour and pull the flaps handle back to lower the flaps. Leave the handle in the down position. There is no position indicator, so you'll need to look left and right to verify their state visually. Press spacebar to continue.
I'm not familiar with Bunyat Sims. I always like checking out YouTube channels on the topic, so maybe I'll look him up. Is he still going?
Okay, keep flying with the runway in view to our left. Reduce speed to 140 to 150 miles per hour for
That's a
the
bit too much speed.
We'll reduce it some more when we turn to line up with the runway. Use the gates as a guide, but don't worry about hitting them perfectly. This part can vary depending on your own style of flying. Good job so far, we're coming up on the final turn. This part will look the same regardless of the type of approach you fly. Turn to begin lining up with the runway and reduce speed to 115 to 120 miles per hour. Do your best to keep the runway in view. Remember, use smooth but decisive control inputs for these next parts, especially with the rudder on the rollout immediately after touchdown. Okay, smoothly reduce throttle and flare to gently set the aircraft down. Shoot for a 3-point landing. You have plenty of runway, so there's no need to rush.
Ooh, yeet.
Maintain alignment as best you can with the rudder. Gently apply the brakes when you can to slow the aircraft.
Must be just landing, but I'm down. What's happening there? I'm not touching the... Oh, I know what's happening. Got the auto ground assist wrap on. I turn that off from here. I know you can't do it in multiplayer. I think I have to do it in the main menu. I'm not doing anything. I was wondering what was happening. I'm not doing anything with the rudders, but it's taking control for me, so... Only throws me off.
Okay, nice job. We have slowed to taxi speed, so I hope that went well. If so, open the cowl flaps, raise the flaps, and unlock the tail wheel for taxi. Take us to any convenient spot off the runway and we'll go through the shutdown. Press spacebar to continue.
Open those.
Once you've come to a stop at your parking location, set the parking brake. Pull the handle, depress and release the toe brake pedals, then release the handle. The toe brake should remain depressed. If you use them extensively during the landing and taxi though, consider leaving them released until they have had a chance to cool down. The brakes can stick if they are held in place while hot. Press spacebar to continue. Now we'll shut down the engine and clean up the cockpit. Advance the throttle until engine RPM is 1000 to clear the engine. Then hold the engine oil dilution switch to on and pull the mixture lever back to idle cutoff. That will cut off the fuel flow to the engine and shut it down. Release the oil dilution switch when the engine stops. That adds some fuel to the oil to condition it for the next startup. Press spacebar to continue. Next, after the prop has stopped turning, set the ignition and battery switches to off. Then, set the fuel selector to the off position. Press spacebar to continue. From here, make a sweep of the cockpit to turn off any switches you turned on during the flight. These could include the radio, pitot heater, lights, gun sight, generator, or any equipment you may have used. It's the crew chief's aircraft again, and this will be the first thing he or she checks, but as a courtesy, always leave the aircraft set up in a safe condition and ready for the next flight. Press spacebar to continue. So far, we have run through a basic flight from beginning to end, starting with an overview of the systems, startup, taxi and takeoff, and now landing. This should have given you a good foundation in basic aircraft functions and prepared you for the next phase, combat operations. We will continue in the next lessons with air-to-air and air-to-ground gunnery, then look at some different
Thank you for the
techniques
follow.
for getting bombs on target. I'll see you then. You can end this lesson at any time using the escape key.
I quickly go into settings. Pretty sure it was doing that. Where is it? Somewhere in here it's got the rudder assist on certain aircraft. Crash or recovery. Can't see it, but I know it's there. I saw the damn thing doing it. It's really beautiful. It's a lot of fun to fly at the moment. I've just done all of these straight, so I'm gonna quickly grab a drink, and then I'm gonna carry on with the gun, the ground, and the dive bombing. And then maybe a little bit later, I'm gonna go into the Moit player, see if I can remember the initial start up and do a couple of missions with it. So yeah, I'll click start, but I'll be right back. Alright, what we got here? It's gunnery, innit?
It's time to move on to the next phase and have a look at combat operations in the P-47. In this lesson, we'll cover aerial gunnery. 8 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns are available, 4 in each wing, with a maximum load of 425 rounds per gun. This provides about 30 seconds of continuous firing for about 15 2-second bursts. After fuel, ammunition is your most important consumable on the aircraft, so you want to use it sparingly. The guns are aimed using a K-14 gyroscopic gun sight. This shows you the amount of lead to pull based on the enemy aircraft's distance. I have the lesson paused so we can go over the controls for these and talk a bit about how to use them. You'll see the drone aircraft we're going to attack circling our position. Press spacebar when you're ready to get started. First, let's talk over theory of operation for the gun system. In practice, all you have to do is place the gun safety switch in the guns and camera position and pull the trigger on the stick. But that doesn't help us understand what went wrong when the guns don't work. Let's trace the voltage through the system and see how the guns are actually fired. This will help you troubleshoot the problem
interesting.
if you try to fire and nothing happens. Press spacebar to continue. The guns are electrically fired. The armament systems all run off the battery circuit, so even if the generator is providing power, the battery switch must be on. With the battery switch on, power to command the guns to fire is drawn from the gun relay circuit breaker. This breaker must be in for the guns to fire. 5 other breakers are also part of the system, but they don't come into play until later. Press spacebar to continue. From the gun relay breaker, power is routed through a series of safeties before it reaches the trigger on the stick. First, a switch in the landing gear handle opens if the handle is down. The handle must be up for the guns to fire. From there, power runs to the main gun safety switch with 3 positions: off, camera, and guns and camera. The off position keeps the circuit open and allows no power to reach any other part of the system. The camera position provides power to the gun camera and to the gun sight through a second circuit breaker labeled gun sight we'll look at later. The third, guns and camera position, routes power to the gun camera and gun sight, but also closes the path and allows power to reach the trigger on the stick. Click to place the switch in the guns and camera position now. Press spacebar to continue.
That's handy to know that the gear has to be up to shoot, because several times I think I've kind of avoided strafing one of these on the ground because I was coming straight on with it. And I thought he could just shoot, pull the trigger and get me, so I dodged it. But yeah, so they can't shoot you on the ground because it goes through the gear.
Now, all we need to do to
More
fire
you know.
the guns is squeeze the trigger on the stick. This completes the electrical circuit and closes the gunfire relay. The relay routes power to start the gun camera through the camera breaker and to the guns through the 4 gun circuit breakers. Solenoids in each gun energize and release the bolts, allowing the guns to fire. Gun recoil continues to operate the guns until the trigger is released, opening the circuit and cutting off power. The solenoids de-energize and the bolts lock back into place. Squeeze the trigger on the stick to test fire the guns now if you would like, and press spacebar to continue.
I won't bother wasting
The
it.
guns are charged on the ground, so they're ready to fire once power is applied and all safeties are disabled, but this also means there's no way to clear a jammed gun while in flight. But if one gun does jam, the rest will continue to fire normally. Press spacebar to continue. That's how the guns work, so now let's look at the K-14 gyroscopic gun sight. The gyro is already active whenever the battery is turned on, but the reticles used for aiming are not visible until the gun safety switch is set to camera or guns and camera as it should be now. Power reaches the bulb that illuminates and displays the reticles through the gun sight circuit breaker and gun sight rheostat on the main electrical panel. You can control the brightness of the reticles by turning this knob. Go ahead and try that and verify that you can see the reticles in the gun sight. Press spacebar to continue. There are 2 reticles or sights displayed, fixed and computing. The fixed sight consists of a cross pointing straight down the gun bore line, surrounded by a 70 mil diameter circular ring. A dot is depressed at 15 mils below the cross with diagonal lines on either side. The idea is to use those lines to judge bullet drop at range by placing the enemy aircraft's wings within the lines, but that's only used as a backup. The other computing sight takes care of that for us. Tick marks are placed below the fixed cross at 30 and 40 mils to aid in air-to-ground gunnery and rocket attack. We'll look at those in a later lesson. For now, let's declutter the display by rotating the lamp cover down. This hides all the fixed side except the cross. We want that to remain to aid in determining how much lead the other computing side is allowing. Do that and press spacebar to continue. The computing side consists of a dot surrounded by 6 diamonds. This side is only accurate when it knows the distance to the target. Your task is to feed the side the right information, then maneuver your aircraft to place the dot squarely on the enemy aircraft while keeping it surrounded by the 6 diamonds. So first, set the span scale to match the wingspan of the aircraft you expect to encounter. You can set this to match the exact dimensions if you know them, but a good rule of thumb is 35 feet for single-engine aircraft, 60 feet for twin-engine aircraft, and 110 feet for 4-engine aircraft. We're up against P-51s in this lesson, so let's set the span scale to 37 feet. Press spacebar to continue. The site uses this wingspan to determine distance through stadiometric ranging. You'll adjust the size of the reticle to match the apparent size of the target using the twist grip on the throttle. That allows the site to estimate the range and show you the right lead to pull. You can also adjust it by rotating the dial on the site itself, but you'll find it very useful to map the throttle twist grip to a lever or slider you can easily access. Try rotating it now. Minimum range shown on the dial is 600 feet, and maximum range is 2,400 feet. You'll see the reticle diamond circle expand and contract at different ranges shown on the dial. You'll also see, after we unpause, that this also moves the reticle to allow for bullet drop and higher deflection at longer ranges. Press spacebar to continue. Okay, now let's see all the theory work in practice. We'll talk a little about technique and try to get some rounds into these targets.
I kind of want to get rid of the gyro.
This is subjective, with techniques used in World War II left up to individual units, but I'll present some ideas that survived World War II and the Korean War where this and similar sites were used. When we unpause, close with one of the targets you've seen circling using lead pursuit, with your nose pointed well ahead. This will decrease the range quickly. Keep your nose positioned so you still have the enemy in view as you close. When you're ready, press spacebar to unpause the lesson.
I should be able to shoot.
The enemy should only be in the sight when you're preparing to fire, so don't worry about adjusting the range yet. Most effective shots will be near the minimum range of 600 feet anyway, so leave the sight's range set there until you're lined up on the target and need to extend the range. As you approach firing range, transition to pure pursuit with the enemy straight ahead in the gun sight. Twist the throttle grip until the target's wings span the diamonds and place the dot on the target. Track the target for at least 1 second to allow the sight to stabilize and do its job. Be sure of your shot and fire a burst of at least 2 seconds.
If this works, I'm going to be impressed, because I mean, I've tried this. I know the gyro gun sight works, and I've tried using it before. I just don't seem to get on with it. I usually just turn it off because I find it distracting, and then learn where my bullets are going to go. Trim. So right now, did say let it stabilize, to be fair. See, it just never seems to.
Okay, nice shot. One last point. Whenever you're about to overtake the enemy, don't slow down. Transition to lag pursuit with your nose behind the enemy. You can also pull up to trade some of that airspeed for altitude. This will leave you with an advantage so you can quickly set up for a re-attack. Take some time to practice what we've gone over so far on the other targets if you would like. There are also several instant action missions that can put you up against a live enemy. We'll move on to air-to-ground gunnery next. Press escape at any time to end this lesson.
shoot one more, then I'll go do the next mission. So I hope you can turn the gyro off in this one. Wouldn't be generator, would it? Oh, I'll look it up. Quite the rattle going on. Don't know if that's just a plane. I love this view. I'm just doing some training. He's talked me through the gun sight. I'm going to get one more shot on a bot. Yeah, I'm going through. I'm very much a fighter pilot, and I like flying the the Spits, the Mustangs, and all that kind of jazz. So this is kind of borderline out of my comfort zone, especially with it being so complicated. But yeah, I'm very much enjoying it. But I'm going to be doing all the training missions to try and get to grips with it. Can you die from G's? Only if you take into account that if you black out, you hit the floor. I don't think that they can fully kill you. I mean, in real life, I'm sure they could if you were denied of oxygen to the blood, for, to the head for that long. But in the game, I don't know if that's registered or not. Sick him out of gunfire. Right, next mission. At ground gunnery. Now this I am familiar with because I'm a dirty vulturing, whatever you want to call me. You will find me on Storm of War quite often, strafing Boozeville.
Now let's move on to the P-47's most well-known mission, ground attack. We'll start with some air-to-ground gunnery and look at techniques for achieving accuracy while strafing. I have 2 strafe pit targets set up just off our nose to the left. You'll see them marked with red smoke. Press spacebar when you're ready to begin and we'll go set up and execute a strafe attack on that location.
But I do like getting kills on humans, so if there's a human on a runway, I'm going for him.
We looked at
as long as it's within the rules.
For the gun system in the last lesson, so let's skip straight to the setup. Set the gun safety switch to the guns and camera position. That illuminates the aiming reticles in the gun sight. The trigger will be hot and the guns will fire when it's pulled. Press spacebar to continue.
I really want to turn the gyro just completely off.
Is there a circuit breaker for the gyro?
On-site compass. A little frustrating. Usually it was like there on the Mustang, isn't it? But let's see it.
The 8 guns are adjusted to have the rounds converge at a point about 1,000 feet in front of you. Give them a quick burst now and you'll see what I mean. The fixed cross on the gun sight is also harmonized to be accurate at this distance. The guns will be most effective against ground targets when you fire at that range, although longer ranges may be appropriate if you're diving from a high angle and need to pull out sooner, the target is shooting back, or you only intend to suppress area targets. Press spacebar to continue.
The longer ranges may be appropriate if you're diving. Okay, so If you're closer than that's quite nice to know. So yeah, if you're closer than 1,000 feet, you probably need to aim up just a little bit.
You'll see 3 different markers on the approach to the pits.
Guilty.
To judge the range. They're placed at 4,000 feet, 1,200 feet, and 800 feet from the targets. You'll get the best results if you fire between the 1,200 and 800 foot markers. The 800 foot marker is the foul line and your cue to cease firing. Press spacebar to continue. Generally, there are 2 types of strafing attacks, low angle strafe and high angle strafe. Low angle strafe attacks are done from a dive angle of less than 35 degrees. This has the benefit of lower airspeed and easier trim management. It also allows you to get closer to the target without having to worry about impacting the ground. The gun sight's harmonized for this situation, so the fixed cross will usually be very accurate. This makes a shallow dive a more consistent option, but it should not always be used in combat. The shallow run-in to the target exposes you to ground fire much longer than on a high-angle strafe. Press spacebar to continue. High-angle strafe attacks are performed at dive angles greater than 35 degrees. This requires rolling on the target from higher altitude, usually about 4,000 to 5,000 feet above the target, so it keeps you out of range of ground fire longer. The downside is that higher speeds are achieved as you dive, and you can find yourself fighting aircraft trim as you attempt to stay lined up on the target. You must also fire from longer range to give yourself time to pull out of the dive. This and the higher speed throws the gun sight's harmonization off, so the cross is not always going to be accurate. You'll have to develop a feel for where to aim based on the dive angle and airspeed you use. I recommend starting with a low angle strafe like we're set up for now, but try high angle at the end if you would like. Accuracy using that technique should be your goal. Press spacebar to continue. Now let's have a closer look at the gun sight and how to aim against ground targets. For aerial gunnery, we use the computing gyro sight, but that's far too sensitive to small bank adjustments.
Please tell me you can turn it off.
For air-to-ground gunnery, we're going to ignore it and only use the fixed sight. Firing at a target from about 1,000 foot range with the cross on target should result in a hit, but it's never that simple. Wind will also need to be accounted for, so aim slightly into the direction the wind is coming from. Not much adjustment will be needed, just move the target to one edge of the cross or the other for a crosswind of about 10 knots, and estimate from there for lighter and stronger winds. Keep in mind, more adjustment for wind is required for longer range shots, though. There's no wind in this lesson, but feel free to try aiming in the wind on your own later. Also remember, longer ranges, shallower dive angle, and less airspeed can result in more bullet drop. The cross should be accurate for the attack we're about to make, but keep this in mind if you're consistently missing, and adjust as required. We'll talk more about long-range shots later. Press spacebar to continue. Now before we make our attack, set RPM to 2550 and manifold pressure to 42 inches. These are the max continuous settings you'll use for non-emergency combat situations. You shouldn't need to touch these again until after your attack is complete. Press spacebar to continue once those are set. Now let's make an attack run, and I'll talk you through it as we go. You'll notice quickly after we unpause that fine, minute control inputs are required to keep the target centered in the sight. This is much easier to pull off if the aircraft is properly trimmed. I'd recommend making 1 or 2 dry passes focusing on trim and nothing else later. It's essential that the needle and ball on the turn and bank indicator remain centered for the sight to be accurate. You want to fire with no bank or side slip at all. Press spacebar to unpause and I'll talk you through the first run. After that, you can turn back around and make as many passes as you would like. Okay, roll left and line up with the target. You'll not always want to roll in from this far out, so try lining up closer in later to get a feel for how much distance you need. The shorter the approach, the less you're exposed to ground fire. Start with the gun sight cross just short of the target and let it slowly track up along the ground. This will happen naturally as the range decreases, so let the geometry of the situation help you out. Ideally, it'll reach the target exactly when you reach firing range. Open fire at 1,200 feet with the cross on target, and stop before 800. Don't fixate on the target. fire, then immediately recover.
It's a target. I'm sure it's not the red smoke. Oh, I see.
Okay, let's turn back to set up for another pass. Now in combat, you'll want to stay on the deck for at least 20 more seconds to stay out of sight. If you were shooting at them, chances are they'll shoot back. Then climb again to form your flight back up. Pilots in World War II almost never rolled in a second time. They found out quickly that's when most losses occur. For now though, you can make more passes using this technique. Try it at different dive angles to see the effect that has on trim and airspeed in the dive. Remember, the higher the dive angle, the sooner you'll need to pull up to avoid hitting the ground. Press spacebar when you're ready to move on, and we'll wrap up with a few notes on firing from long range.
Well, let's trim out a bit. That's a bit better. It's pretty good.
Okay, now to wrap up, just a quick note or two on long range shots. Most attacks you make
Let me
should
shoot.
be at the 1,000 foot of range we just saw. Don't expect to penetrate anything with the most lightly armored vehicles out beyond that point, but the gun can still be an effective weapon against soft targets out to 4,000 feet and beyond. This can be a useful skill, especially when you're being shot at and need to keep your distance. Now, it's possible to take all that information and calculate the exact point to put the target in the sight for any given scenario. This varies, though, depending on the exact model of aircraft and ammunition being used, so it was only done occasionally at the unit level in World War II. Any gunnery tables you find are not likely to apply to our exact aircraft. What I recommend doing is what most units did. Keep it simple and come up with 2 or 3 standard setups you can fly.
Right, and this there. Can't bear to see it at the ground. Yeah, for some reason it changed my profile on my stick, so. Alright, let's try some dive bombing. Sorry, I had a few messages to respond to.
Now let's move on to dive bombing. The guns and rockets can't cut it against targets like bridges, fortifications, or dug-in forces, so this will be your best means of applying air power in many situations. The left and right wing stations are equipped with bomb shackles that can carry a 1,000-pound class bomb, and the center line station has a shackle that can carry up to a 500-pound bomb. We have all 3 stations loaded now. Fuel tanks can also be carried on each station, and the procedures for releasing them when they're empty are identical to releasing a bomb. Everything described here applies to both. In this lesson, we'll go over how to operate the system and try the dive bombing technique used by P-47 pilots in World War II. Many times this will be done near your own ground forces, so learning accuracy will be key. You can see our target just forward of the left wing, marked with red smoke. Press spacebar when you're ready to get started. First, let's talk over theory of operation for the armament system. Stores are suspended from bomb shackle hooks at each station. These hooks are opened after firing voltage reaches a release unit. Arms on the release unit trip levers on the shackles that open the hooks, allowing the store to fall away. In short, all you have to do is place the safety switch up for the station or stations you wish to release and press the bomb release button on the stick. But that doesn't help us understand what went wrong when the stores don't release. Let's trace the voltage through the system and see how it actually works. Press spacebar to continue. The 3 weapon stations and their safeties are wired a little differently from the gun system, but the overall concepts are the same. The armament systems all run off the battery circuit, so even if the generator is providing power, the battery switch must be on. With the battery switch on, voltage to command whatever store is loaded to release is drawn from the bomb and tank release circuit breaker. This circuit breaker must be in for stores to be released electrically. Press spacebar to continue. Unlike the gun trigger, the bomb release button on the stick is always hot. Depressing it always closes the store's release relay and attempts to route power to each station. The safeties for each weapon station are located after the button in the circuit, so power stops at the 3 switches before reaching the station when the switches are off. The switches are labeled left station, right station, and belly station. 2 other switches on the same panel are for rarely used chemical tanks, for smoke screens or tear gas. They're not used for bomb or fuel tank release. Press spacebar to continue.
Such a good looking machine. Sorry, I got sidetracked.
Go ahead and place the left and right station switches up for our first attack, but don't press the bomb release button. When it switches up, the circuit for that station is closed, and firing voltage will reach the station when the bomb release button is pressed. So when you press the button with 1, 2, or all 3 switches up, the hooks securing the bomb or tank in place open and allow them to fall away. Press spacebar to continue.
Thank you for the follow, buddy.
The primary means of getting them off the aircraft, but there are also mechanical handles that can be pulled to release them in an abnormal situation, like loss of electrical power or failure of one of the release units at a station.
That's cool.
The 2 on the left release the wing station stores, while the one on the right releases the belly station store. These are connected directly to the release levers on the bomb shackle via cables, so giving them a strong tug will allow the store to fall away. Press spacebar to continue. Now, how it all works was the easy part. The hard part is releasing a bomb at the exact time and place to ensure a hit, using only the fixed gun sight as a guide. So let's go over that now. Place the gun safety switch in the guns and camera position. This has nothing to do with bomb release. We only need this switch on to display the gun sight. Verify the fixed sight is displayed.
I'm hoping that they're going to come back.
Let's talk through the attack before flying it. Look to the left just above the wing and you'll see the target marked with red smoke. For this lesson, we'll begin the dive from about 9,000 feet above the target at 250 miles per hour. We'll use a 45-degree dive and release the bomb at 3,000 feet above the target. This is a very standard setup for World War II, especially the 3,000-foot release altitude, although dive angles as high as 60 degrees were sometimes used. A series of gates is now visible that show the path to the roll-in point where the dive starts and provide a guide for a 45-degree dive. We'll approach that point with the target in view just to one side, then roll in when we judge the dive angle to be correct. Pull the throttle back to control airspeed, then align the gun sight with the target.
The plane looks so good, I must admit.
Low or negative G during the
Bit of
dive,
a beast
so the
though.
bomb could stick in the shackle or even recontact the airplane. The last gate before the target is at the release altitude. When we approach the release altitude, we'll pull the nose up slightly to place the target at the bottom 40 mil line in the sight. Press the bomb release button to release the bomb, then pull up smoothly to avoid fragmentation. Press spacebar to continue. We saw the effect altitude, airspeed, and diving
Look at those
had
bombs
on rotor
back.
drop during the gunnery lesson, and those same concepts still apply here, only more so. The trick then is to estimate how much the bomb's trajectory will change for the dive angle, altitude, and airspeed to release it from, and place the target lower in the sight to compensate. Shallower dives, higher altitude, or less airspeed result in more drop, so the target will need to be lower in the sight. Steeper dives, lower altitude, and more airspeed result in less drop, so the target will need to be placed higher in the sight. You'll also need to aim in the direction the wind is coming from. The stronger the wind or higher the release altitude, the more you need to compensate. There's no wind in this lesson though, so line up exactly on the target. Press spacebar to continue. I mentioned in the gunnery lesson that it's possible to take all the information and calculate the exact point to put the target in the sight for any given scenario, but I can't overstate how much individual technique comes into play here. For me, the correct point for the conditions in this lesson is 40 mils below the cross, the bottom horizontal line on the sight, but it's very likely that I or any other pilot missed the intended conditions consistently in one direction or the other. So what I recommend doing is what most units did in World War II, keep it simple and come up with 2 or 3 standard setups and use whatever place in the sight works best for those. So start with the 40 mil line at the bottom of the sight as a guide, and then adjust from there depending on where your bombs consistently hit. Now let's fly through the bombing run and see it all work. When you're ready, press spacebar to unpause. I'll talk you through the approach as we go.
Please give me my bombs back.
Okay, go for 250 miles per hour at the roll-in, although there are no set rules as long as you're consistent. Now I have us approaching in an arc that requires a little left-hand bank to help keep the target in view with the default head position. If you're flying in VR or with a head tracker, you can just lean over some and keep it in sight, then fly a straight line to the point the dive begins. Okay, we're approaching the roll-in point. Note where the target is in relation to the wing as we go. You can use that to judge the right point to roll in from when you no longer have the gates to use as a guide.
Well, I think I screwed up with the fact that I accidentally hit the bomb button. For some reason I forgot that I flicked the switches.
Okay, roll in to the left and pull to align the sight with the target. Be sure to fly straight and not to arc over as you dive.
This is scary.
Okay, nose up slightly and place the target at the bottom line on the reticle. Release at 3,000 feet.
Let's just pretend I released. See what it says.
Weapon away. Pull up smoothly to avoid the frag. Worry about looking for threats, not following the bomb. In combat, you have 2 options after release. You can pull up immediately, trading the airspeed gain in the dive for altitude and climbing quickly back out of flak range. This may be a good option if you're not being shot at, but it carries more risk. Or you can continue down to the deck and stay out of the flak gunner's view. Leave the general area, then climb back up to altitude. For now though, let's go ahead and turn left and climb again. We'll do a quick BDA and then set up for another attack. Okay, let's see how we did. Look for the craters that mark the impact points. Don't beat yourself up if you're dozens or even hundreds of feet off target. Bombing in World War II was all about probabilities of hits spread over many attempts, not about the pinpoint accuracy we expect today. An entire squadron of 12 to 16 aircraft were usually dispatched against point targets like bridges, radar stations, or gun emplacements to ensure a reasonable chance of the target being destroyed. So don't expect to do everything yourself. With practice though, you should be able to achieve consistent hits within 30 to 40 feet of the target. It's all about finding the technique that works for you and sticking to it. You still have a bomb on the belly station, so turn left and set up for another attack if you
Oh, really?
And when you're done, press escape to end the lesson.
Alright, well, because I don't have the bomb, because I'm an idiot, I'm going to do a little bit of practice with that. I'm going to do it through, because that was the last mission anyway, I'm going to do it through the instant action. So usually there's a bombing. mission in here somewhere. Very shocked if they didn't have any ground attack. After this, I'll see if I can pull off a cold start. If I'm still struggling, I will refresh my memory in the first tutorial, and then maybe we can get into some multiplayer.
Ahead of you at the large fire are static and moving ground targets to engage.
Don't give me any bombs. Ah, whatever. Sure, I'll be fine. Hey Buck, how are you? You jumping in just as I'm really finishing the training? This is just an instant action that I was going to practice some bombing with, but yeah, going to be trying a cold start in a minute. What a machine. It's actually been quite enjoyable. It's just a little bit complicated. The cockpit is a bit more complex than the others I'm used to. I'm sure I'll get there. There's just lots of little things you need to know about the, the turbocharger with the overspinning if you go too high, and there's an intercooler, oil you need to keep track of, the cowl flaps, which I think you just shut after takeoff, which isn't too bad. I don't know why the stick goes all wobbly though. It's so badly wobbly. I don't know if that's just the plane, or if I've got maybe I've got a conflict in there somewhere. Oh, absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much, buddy. As I said, I really appreciate it, and you didn't have to, but yeah, really appreciate it. Shouldn't be. Yeah, in fact, I think you got it right to the penny on the conversion, if I remember rightly. I was hoping there'd be a train there. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I put it on here. I just thought it might be handy to have it set up. Because if anyone cares, I'll just end up posting in there. I'm coming on in an hour or so, or I'm going to be doing this, going to be doing that. A few people have asked if I've got a Discord and I didn't have one, so I thought, now's probably the time to set one up. Been raiding everybody else's when I'm doing Storm of War at the moment. I think that's enough of that. Let's see how good or bad my memory is. No game sound. I might have just turned it down low, or else I'll have a desktop audio. I'll double check in a second. Yeah, I think it may just be really quiet. I turned it down because when I was doing the tutorial, there was a chap talking to me. I can put it back up now.
Use this mission to practice starting up your aircraft, taxiing, and taking off.
Can't even remember where to get started. On. Hydraulic pressure. Oh, that's to be in the neutral position, doesn't it? Splinter paint. Be kind of cool. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Did say that they use the same hydraulic pressure. Let's leave that until the engine's running.
Turn on the ground power. Copy. Ground power is now on.
Forward, that needs to be full forward. That's in the right place. Notch forward. Both on. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Let's just go for it. If it messes up, it messes up. I had to energize first a little bit. There we go. Oh, I'm gonna say that I messed something up. Oh no, 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 I called it. I'm taking that as a total win. First start up without the assists. But then it's turn the battery on. Generator on. That should have probably been open earlier. I should have hydraulic pressure. The flaps. Trying to desperately remember if there's anything else I need to... I know that I have to wait for the levels to kind of warm up. 3 minutes and it should be there. Had to put the revs at about 900. 2000, which is about there. Here's something fast. So I am just going to let it warm up, do a takeoff to make sure that I've done everything right. Yeah, no problem, buddy. And if I have, I'm going to take it to try online, I guess. Trying to look around to see if there's anything that I can't remember. They did say to, like, you know, test all the lights and stuff, so I can do all that if I needed to, but I'm not too worried. Wouldn't know what to do if a warning light came on anyway. See, that's still getting up to temperature there. Yeah, I've done a landing, but only in the tutorial. It's quite a stable machine. It's probably as easy to land as, you know, a P-51. I've somehow got the ground rudder assist on, but I'm not too worried about that. I can figure that out later. I just want to make sure that I can turn it on and take it off properly without messing anything up. Just trying to remember where I have to take off what I really need to do. I think all it is raise the gear and close the cowl flaps. Yeah, I know, right? But I've taken to it more than I thought I would. I think it's going to be one of those aircraft where I'm going to have to get a real map and mark all the objectives on there, because my navigation skills are not the best. Oh, I did something wrong. What'd I do? What'd I do? Shame. Why did that? That's because that turned off. Alright. On the plus side, let's see. Why did that turn off? Sure, there's a ghost in my PC sometimes just doing stuff for me. That needs to be about there, doesn't it? I need ground power. I think I've already got ground power. Let's do energize. Energize for a second. And gauge. Something doesn't sound right. I was doing it the wrong way around. Maybe it's energized, then it's engaged. Thought it was that way, and then I think I gone and broke it. That's a shame. I thought I had it first time. I think it would have been okay if I didn't, if that, for whatever reason, didn't change off. Turn the battery off and try again. But that needs to be on idle cutoff. Ah, thanks for the follow. Don't question the name. Should be. What was Energate? Gauge and then energize, but it might have been it the way around. Come on, do it. Nah, I think something's cocked up. I'm gonna try one more cold start, and if not, I'll go back through the tutorial. I want to make sure I get it right for when I go on the multiplayer. That's what the training's for, I guess. I think that was, I don't know what, there must have been a conflict somewhere. I did something, but it turned off the main thing, didn't it?
To practice starting up your aircraft, taxiing, and taking off.
So main, boost forward, prop pitch forward. That 1 inch, make sure where it is. Put the flaps into neutral. Hydraulic pressure. And then open L flaps. We're open. Time that up.
Chief, turn on the ground power. Copy.
Give a
Ground power is now on.
burst of energize, was it? And got it the wrong way around in my head now. Yeah, I think I'm doing it the wrong way around. I think it's energize for 15 seconds. Alright, started on about the 12. There we go. Still didn't feel as clean as last time, but got it. Make sure nothing. Now I can turn the battery on. I don't know if I need to wait for that to get charged before I turn off the power. Generator's on. On site. Very odd to put that on. Right.
Chief, turn off the ground power. Copy. Ground power is now off.
Battery's definitely on. Yeah, I said this last time, I should have opened the... Doesn't that work? Hey. Just give it 3 minutes, wait until the... I'm going to keep an eye on that, see if it changes itself this time. I think that's the only thing that screwed me up last time, is for some reason that turned itself off. Don't know if I hit something on the keyboard or something. It might be a bit low. I'm a bit heavy on the RPM. Let's have it around 900. So a bit concerned about the amps. Oh, that does not need to be on. That might have been a problem that I did last time. It's the other one there. Pilot heated, that's fine. Right, so not the pilot, not the dilute oil switch. That's in the upward position. The defrost. It's unlocked. Unfortunately, I think it's just a bit of a slow wait, see if it's gonna work. I imagine it would be safe to taxi now, but I don't want to risk it. Something I'll experiment with later. I'm still a little bit concerned that no amps are showing up. I don't know why that is. Is that pressed? I can push to reset. Everything else looking good, just letting the oil temperature get up, that's all. Maybe that's why this is closed now I think about it. Oil temperature if I close. Sorry, it might be my fault we were heating up so slow. That was off by default. on fuel. Pressure fine. Cylinder head temps can go up to 260. We're almost at minimum temperature. I know this is a little slow. As I said, want to get it right before the online. At least it hasn't conked out on me this time. Must have been. I can't believe that turned off. Maybe I put it in the wrong position. It just had a little bit of fuel in the engine or something. Really nice touch having the scuff marks down there. Give it another minute. Said it should only take 3 minutes, but I'm scanning with my eyes, just like, is there anything I've missed? I think we're good. And actually, the guy in the tutorial was right. It's like, we went over this and it took 20 minutes, but actually it shouldn't take you that long once you've kind of just, you know what you gotta do. It's not solid in my head yet, but still. I think I got two fairly good startups. Just got a little bit confused with the engage energize switch. Hey, look. I'm gonna call that on the line, so I'm gonna try and taxi to the right. Weird place to start you, though. See, it's doing controls for me and it throws me off. I need to find out what that is. Thanks to, basically. Unless I've spelt it wrong. I've probably spelled it wrong, knowing me. No, thank you, man. I think it's... So now you gotta tie these together. That's in the right place. That's auto rich. No flaps. Just go for it, I guess. Oh, hang on. No. Gotta lock that. There we go. See the auto rudders going, that's not me. It's really frustrating. The jug indeed. And that's our kind of cruise speed. Push to close. Oh, push to close. I think I've got it. There's probably... I need to probably fine tune my actions and figure out how I can push this thing. But I think for doing some ground attacks... 9 out of 10, I'll take it. Thank you. I'm here all week. Yeah, stunning machine. Flop. Very well modelled, looks really good. Oh, there's fucking wolves around above the clouds, huh? Trying to do the flyby one again. Where is that? There we go. I love that view. I've not got to fly the channel map very much as well, so this is quite nice. I wonder what airfield this is. Is this Manston? I'm at Manston. My granddad flew out of Manston. Oh, it really does, doesn't it? Yeah, so I think I would have earned my wings and I would have been somewhat combat ready. Love it. Right, so I am 100% ready to go into a multiplayer mission. I have, unfortunately, one errand that has popped up. So I'm going to be out for about maybe half an hour, 40 minutes or so. And then I'm going to be back and I'm going to do multiplayer for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 hours at least and see how things go before I fancy getting some food, and then I'll probably be on for the evening. I've got not much else to do tonight. I might have to pick the girlfriend up from work. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, hopefully I'll catch you guys in a little bit. As I said, I've got a Discord up now. I'll try and keep myself posted on there as to what I'm going to be up to and just general. I like having people around to chat to, as you can tell from me talking away while I'm flying all the time. But yeah, thanks guys. As I said, I'll be back